Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Project Decade video series. In this series, I will be expounding on a proposed player power system of upgradable abilities that I believe will be simpler, easier to implement, easier to balance than the player power systems that we've had in the last few expansions. And I'll be iterating on these proposals based on feedback, if I get the volunteers I need. But before I get into the details, I figured I should have a foreword about why I'm doing this project in the first place, and to include a few additional details that don't make sense to put in any of the other videos in the series. First of all, the wherefore and the why. I started this project shortly after patch 9.1 came out, thinking, probably the time is right. Blizzard's probably going to start thinking about what systems they're going to put in the next expansion around the 9.2 mark. So getting words in ahead of that time would help to steer Blizzard in the right directions. But it's also worth stating that after I'd gotten 10 or 11 of the class's upgrades written up for the first iteration, the news of the big, sprawling, massive scandal and lawsuit hit. And having listened to the reasoned out reactions of other big names in the community like Asmongold, Bellular, Soul Breezy, Alkaline, there were two things that I realized. First of all, there are plenty of bad actor developers and employees that we have heard about, plenty of discrimination in how hiring and promotions are done, and those have reflected badly on the quality of World of Warcraft. And while the bad actors are the ones you hear about, and the ones that all too often form our mental image of what the company as a whole is like, the reality is there are a lot of good guys at Blizzard that you don't hear about. I mean, some are better than others, and some are braver than others, but there are plenty of good guys who did not take part in the horrific acts. And those good guys, they need all the help and the understanding that they can get in a very chaotic and confusing situation. Which leads me to my second realization. There are going to be a lot of firings at Blizzard. A lot of upheaval. A lot of chaos. People are going to get moved out of teams, probably team leaders, considering that many of them had to have known about the bad behaviors going on. So without leaders, at this point, when Final Fantasy XIV is closing in for the kill, the one time in World of Warcraft's whole history where the game needs strong leadership, a strong focus on direction, there's a big risk that there will be no direction because the leadership will be constantly in question. Also, the developers who are left are going to be even more pressed for time to get their work done, leaving them less time to engage with the community. So right now, when players have the lowest confidence in the dev team, the one time when it's most important that there be engagement with the community is also the one time when the dev team will have the least ability to engage and communicate. So, when the time comes for the next expansion to start development, there is a grave danger that they'll have nothing to go on. Unless, of course, someone gives them something to go on. You know what? Back in 2008, I saw that something had to be done, things needed to be said, someone had to do it, so I figured, why not me? And 13 years later, I'm doing it again. Even if Project Decade doesn't get a single proposed spell upgrade into the game, let alone the upgrade system concept as a whole, there will be something gained from it. At the very least, Blizzard employees will have forums with in-depth discussions of what players want for their specs and classes, what makes players excited. And the development team can draw on those discussions to figure out what they're going to do. That alone is reason enough to proceed with the project. But there's more. I knew that the upgrade system I came up with in my earlier videos had a lot of potential. I wasn't the only one who independently came up with a system of upgrading abilities. So Breezy, yeah, I missaid his name earlier in this video, sorry about that, but he came up with a similar concept a couple of years ago. In fact, the fact that he and I each came up with a very similar concept is, in my opinion, evidence that Blizzard not only should, but probably will, use an upgrade system in the next expansion. Even with all of that being true, my upgrade concept just wasn't getting any attention. I started asking myself why not, and I concluded it was because this system was not showing players what it could do for them specifically. Those videos may have contained a good general idea, but it was all very abstract. So I figure actually coming up with concrete examples for each and every class is the only thing that'll really get people excited or thinking about it. So again, that's what I'm doing. I'm making it a point to do my research as well, consulting Wowhead and Icy Veins to see what the existing rotations are like, what abilities have a place in the rotation, what abilities don't have a place, and why. So all of that's the wherefore and why. But there's more that I'd like to say about the upgrade concept as a whole, and about some crucial bits of context that would probably need to be part of the whole upgrade system that don't really make sense to talk about in any of the individual videos about specific classes. To provide an overview, which is yet another rehash of some of my earlier videos, the idea is that each spec has 3 slots, much like the PvP talents, and each spec has 7 upgrade abilities to choose from to equip in those slots. Equipping an upgrade ability replaces one of the abilities you already have with something new. Sometimes it's just plain more powerful. Sometimes its effects are different, like trading single-target damage for multi-target or vice versa. In general, this is meant to be a trick for allowing developers to start adding abilities again without spellbar bloat becoming an issue. And when the expansion ends, the developers can keep those upgrade abilities around, and even add more of them without any fear of spellbar bloat. I aim to create 7 possible upgrades for each spec for iteration 1. And you can equip up to 3 different upgrades at a time. You can switch which upgrades you have equipped anytime you're out of combat. That is very much intended to be extremely convenient and the polar opposite of the drag that conduits and covenants have turned out to be in Shadowlands. Now, here's the thing. Attached to the upgrade abilities is a system that's very much like the artifact weapon system, in that there are traits you can buy with a long-haul currency that you're going to be collecting throughout the expansion. I'm calling it ability power. It's much like artifact power, anima, or azurite. You collect it from the same kinds of content you'd progress through for each of those currencies, and then you spend that currency on traits that improve your upgrade abilities, or that improve your other abilities for that matter. Some of these traits are meant to have their effects stick around permanently and stay with us even after the expansion's over. Others are meant to go away at the expansion's end. I'm calling this semi-borrowed power, attempting to strike a good balance between rewards that we can keep and rewards that are expansion specific. To illustrate, let's say that Fist of the Heavens is a paladin's upgrade for Judgment, and to start out, it throws out just 3 sparks of light on impact. Spending ability power to purchase a trait can increase the number of sparks from 3 to 4, buying it again can increase it from 4 to 5, and getting the 3rd rank can increase the spark count from 5 to 6. The upgrade isn't everything it can be when you first get it, but it becomes what it's meant to be once it's fully upgraded. Those are the kinds of traits that stick with us at the expansion's end, with their effects baked into the upgrade abilities. But some traits can go away without harming the game. For example, traits that buff the damage or healing of an ability by a small percentage, ones that buff crit chance or that buff overall stats like haste or versatility, those can go away at an expansion's end. I mean, they're worth spending ability power on, but they won't break a class when they go away. I'm throwing this long-haul currency in here because I figure Blizzard wouldn't be happy with an expansion that didn't have some kind of carrot that they were dangling in front of players to keep them logging in and doing world quests or dungeons. And I picked the artifact weapon system as a starting point because that was a fun system that was also simple. The choices you made while you were spending artifact power were which traits to get first, not which traits to get and which traits to forego. That actually made the system more fun in the end because you knew. You weren't really sacrificing anything per se when you made decisions on how to spend your artifact power. You would get those other traits that you weren't picking up today, you just get them later. That's how this ability power trait system would work too. Ultimately, all traits will be yours, but you decide how your character develops in getting them all. Now, after doing a compare and contrast between my concept and Soul So Breezy's concept, I realized the biggest thing this concept had under Soul's concept was the fact that his concept told a story of character development. My original versions didn't. I believe a story is a powerful thing, so it would be better if a story could be drawn into my concept. And then I realized there could be a kind of a story. In earlier videos, I had the ability power traits just haphazardly thrown around, but what if they were organized into a kind of a progression? For example, what if there were about 3 different interlinking paths that could be traversed, and each path had a theme? For example, for a healer like a Holy Paladin, there could be one path for group healing, one path for single target healing, and one for damage and utility. Of course, there's overlap. A trait that buffs Beacon of Light could, in theory, count as either single target or multi-target, so it could function as a bridge between single target and multi-target paths. So a paladin who began going up the single target healing parts of the trait map could change their minds and start traversing the multi-target paths once they reach the Beacon of Light perk. Or, for that matter, the Fist of the Heavens upgrade does some multi-target healing, so it could function as a bridge from multi-target healing to damage and utility. For that matter, Holy Shock. It can be either a single target heal or a damage spell, so traits that buff it could act as a bridge too. That's just one spec. DPSers could have single target, multi-target, and utility, or there could be other things to build path themes around, like immediate damage versus damage over time, or resource generation versus raw damage. The possibilities depend on the spec, really. Heck, there could be fire, nature, and physical damage for enhancement shaman if they felt like it, light and dark for discipline, sun and moon for balance, all that kind of thing. There's all kinds of possibilities of progression that could tell stories of how your characters learn and grow. You're the one who decides how that story's going to go, which is what RPGs are supposed to be all about. Of course, which traits are even going to be available in these ability power progression trees depend on which upgrades there are going to be. And that, in turn, depends on my viewers. Which upgrades do you want? Which ones have I come up with that can't possibly work? Which ones have I cooked up that just plain don't look appealing to you? Which upgrades that I dreamed up need to be modified so the trade-off is different or the numbers are balanced? And which ones look like a stroke of genius? You'll need to look at my other videos for specific classes to get answers to those questions, so please have a look. There are links in the description.